Every week, I speak with men who feel lost in life. Some are young and are searching for direction. Others are grinding every day to build something that lasts. And a few have already reached the top only to find themselves disillusioned and empty. Different stories, different stages, but the pain underneath is the same. They're all trying to figure out what went wrong, why, no matter how hard they work or how much they achieve, life still feels confusing, heavy, and hollow. Over the past 8 months, I've spoken with more than 500 men just like this: YouTube subscribers, clients, and entrepreneurs. And I discovered that almost all of them fall into one of three types. So in this video, I'm going to show you what those three types are, how each one of them loses their way, and what happens when they finally come back into alignment with truth. Because until you understand where you are on the path, you can't move forward. And so let me begin by describing how I discovered these three types. A year ago, I found myself in a tough spot. I had been grinding as I had always done, but it just wasn't working. Until I grind myself to the bone and I had to sit down and really contemplate my purpose in life and why God had been showing me all this time that I had been climbing up the wrong tree. In that space, in that sacred space, I was able to stop and listen. And God gently guided me back to what my sole purpose here is to do in this life. And that is to speak with men like you. So the first thing he invited me to do was to get back on YouTube and start speaking to the pains that I see men experiencing that are also reflected in my own heart. In a way, I am you and you are me. We're all traveling the same journey together, although with different equipment and maybe on different lengths of the journey. And in that space, I was also able to hear how he wanted me to go deeper by speaking one on one with you, my subscribers. And where in the past I had charged $1,000 to get on a phone call with me because the majority of my business was through products and courses. In my heart, I was prompted to lower that price significantly, something that was completely against my normal way of going about business. And in that, I was able to open the space for hundreds of men to book a call, fill out an application, and get on a 1 hour Zoom call with me. And beyond just the guidance that I was able to provide and giving those men hope and direction in their lives, I was exposed to a myriad, a multitude of different men from different walks of life, but they all struggled with the very same issue: clarity. That's why they were hopping on the calls. Clarity, lack of clarity about what to do in life, how to handle the burdens in life, or where to go next after a life of success. And after those calls, I took the transcript of each one of them and I pumped it into ChatGPT and I asked it the simple prompt: tell me what the common thread through all of these men are. It gave me a whole lot of demographic information, but it also did something very powerful. It showed me the key words, the most important words, or the most prolific words, most used words in the conversation that I had with these men and the application that they filled out to get on the call with me. And the two that stuck out the most were clarity and direction. Clarity and direction is what all of these men were looking for. But then we went a little bit further and I asked Chat to help me understand who these men are so I could speak more directly to them. And it provided me with three. It said about 50% of the men that you're speaking with, Elliott, are seekers. These are younger men who are maybe just straight out of college or they're young in their careers and they're really not sure what to do with themselves. And then about 25% of them are builders. These are guys who have maybe already been married, they already have their career, maybe they're building their business, but the weight of it all is just stressing them out. And they're struggling with how to balance their life, balance their business, balance their health, and keep those balls juggling without dropping any one of them. And of course, all the stress that comes with being able to protect and provide a family that might be growing. And then about 25% of them were providers. These were men, usually in their 50s, and they've already gone through the seeker and builder stage, and now they're sort of successful in the eyes of the world. They have money, they have a home, they can go on vacations, they can pretty much do whatever it is that they desire to do. They've got the world at their fingertips, but yet their hearts feel empty. And so, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these three types, but I want you to listen to all three types. Why? Because this spectrum is something we'll all experience. If you're a seeker, guaranteed you're going to pass through the builder phase. If you're a builder, guaranteed you're going to reach the provider phase. If you're a provider, you know what it's like to be a builder and you know what it's like to be a seeker. The interesting thing, though, about life is that it's not linear, it's a spiral. And so when I found myself a year ago, after achieving great success and living most of the past 10 years as a builder, I found myself a seeker again. And the very same practices, the very same paradigm, the very same way of being that I learned to adopt in that sacred space as a seeker allowed me now to go back into this spiral once again. So even if you're a provider, you're probably on the threshold of seeking again, and the cycle goes on. So let's dive in. Let's begin with the seeker. 50% of the men that I spoke with are seekers, and that makes sense because a good portion of you are still in your 20s, maybe early 30s, but the majority are younger. And the real question is that he doesn't know what to do next. Life has prepared you for what life wants you to do. Go to school, get good grades, go to college, be a good boy. But now you're at a stage where you're wanting to spread your wings. You've gone from what Robert Bly in his anthropological anthem, The Iron John, The Way of Men, describes as going from the white horse to the red horse. The white horse is innocence. You're a good boy. You're doing what you're supposed to do. The red horse is that feeling of passion, that feeling of excitement, that feeling of adventure that rises up in a man right about that stage of his life. That red horse forces you to seek an adventure. What am I going to go do? Who am I going to be? How am I going to carve my way in this world? And the problem is that there are too many options. Now, I think this has always been the case, but it's just so poignant and potent in the world that we live in today because the internet has exposed us to so many options. There are so many options that it can be confusing, and then you end up being frozen by indecision. The greatest enemy to a man in the seeker stage is to be looking at what other people do. Because all your life, you've been told to look at to the front of the class, do what the teacher tells you to do what your parents tell you to do. And now that you're looking to spread your wings and become a man in yourself, the tendency is to do the same. Compare yourself to other men, look at what other guys are doing, seeing the successes that men on higher or further along than you have achieved and wondering, why don't I have that yet? So there's an impatience associated with it. And one of the biggest lies associated with this is, what if I choose the wrong thing? And the reason why that's a lie is because, as Robert Greene describes in his book Mastery, you are actually in a stage of apprenticeship. An apprentice, well, apprentices don't really build anything. An apprentice doesn't really achieve anything. An apprentice is learning. And the best way to be an apprentice, even according to Robert Greene in this book, Mastery, is to expose yourself to a myriad of different crafts, things that you can master. So trying different jobs. Now, this is the better way than sitting behind the screen and looking at what other people are doing. You want to get your hands dirty. You want to get out there and do things. You want to have experiences for a number of reasons. Number one of which because they add to you, but number two is because it allows you to see where your inclinations actually are. See, a lot of times our inclinations are mirrors of what we see other people do. We want to do what we see them do. But the fact is that you do have a unique inclination that has been buried by the world's expectations. So wherever your heart is stirring, wherever your heart is taking you, go into it. Find a job, work for free. Don't expect to make six figures right away. Get out there and do something so that you can begin to discover what your purpose may be. And the reason why I put this here is because it's a second lie that's associated with what if I choose the wrong thing? The idea or the lie that their purpose is somewhere out there. You're not going to discover your purpose. You're not going to find your purpose. You're going to awaken your purpose by knocking on different doors. Don't expect to find it right away, but know that it's there inside you waiting to be exposed. So just a little bit of advice from an old dude like that's been through what you've been through. But this is you if you are a seeker. And like I said, this is not just guys in their 20s. This is not just young guys. Providers and builders may have to go back to the stage at various times in your life. So be aware of the power and the potency of the position of the seeker. The seeker is crossing the threshold into initiation. And as Robert, this is the third Robert I'm quoting, as Robert Moore describes in his talks on masculine initiation, initiation isn't a one-time thing. We experience initiation multiple times through our lives as we go through different stages in our lives. So be wary, providers and builders, that you may be at some point be called to seeking too. It could come after a season of life, but it could also come after a traumatic experience, a divorce, a sickness, an accident, something like that can thrust you back into that threshold moment where you now have to explore the truth of who you are and what you're called to do. So that's the seeker. The builder will move on to next. He's building his life, but he feels trapped. Now, I can relate to this quite a bit as it's been presented to you. If you've been following me on YouTube, you know I started in 2007 and I was a young father, 4 children, opened a warehouse gym in St. Petersburg, Florida, a real ghetto gym. I was one of the first to have like a warehouse type gym that was no frills. And YouTube came about. I started making YouTube videos, and you can literally watch the evolution of my builder phase. And this is where everything is on your shoulders. You're carrying quite a burden. You are really in your warrior phase. Here as a seeker, in a way you're still a hero, right? Going on the hero's journey. Maturation or the maturing process for the hero is the warrior. And this is where, good, I found my path. I've got my axe, I got my machete, and I'm chopping my way through the woods. You're working, you're determined, you're focused. One of the challenges is the pressure, the panic, and the performance that's associated with that single-mindedness. If you're anything like me, it was all about how I could build my business. My wife did a great job at home with the kids, and I was present for them when I was home. But 90% of my thoughts were towards how can I provide? How can I provide? How can I provide? The pressure to provide, the panic of not being able to provide the way you want to, and the performance that you become addicted to that's associated with the numbers. Am I getting more subscribers? Am I getting more views? Am I making more money? Am I getting more sales? Am I getting more clients? Right? So life goes from an experience, a heartfelt experience, and an intuitive feel for where you should be going to a purely objective mission driven, money focused, or numbers focused pursuit. And that can feel challenging, especially if you let the other areas of your life fall aside. A lot of guys in this stage, they'll come to me and their health is failing. Man, Elliot, I gained 40 pounds over the past 5 years. Or their relationship, man, and my wife and I, things were great when we were dating. We got married, the kid came, and I'm building my business, and it's like we just don't have time for each other. Your inner life, which is the foundation for all of it, is usually non existent because, well, who has time? Who has time for an hour of meditation? Who has time for prayer and piety? Nobody's really got time for that because I'm focused on the outward. Here, we're really focused on the outward. How much longer can I keep this up is the pervading fear. How much longer until this all falls through? And I remember that was 100% my predominant emotion. And I carry that with me. I mean, I really resonate with this guy. It's like, as long as I can keep the plate spinning, it's going to be okay. But I feel like the bottom's going to fall out sometime soon. And with the chaos in the world today, if you're spending too much time looking at the news and what's going on in the world, you'll feel the weight, the heaviness of what's happening and take that on yourself. So it'll be like, oh, at least this is the way I used to think, there's not enough time before financial collapse. I was thinking like, global financial collapse, the financial reset, then we had the pandemic and it was like new world order. And so, I go down my Alex Jones rabbit holes. And it was like, I have to hurry up and prepare for this thing that's going to fall upon us. And that's really the attitude. It's a fear that things are going to fall apart that you experience here that causes you the imbalance in your life. And balance is so important. Depth is so important for all of these. But for this guy in particular, imbalance between body being balanced and business definitely takes hold. And then finally, he believes that hard work is going to fix it. That's, once again, I relate, that's been my modus operandi, is work harder, grind harder, hustle, and you'll finally get what you want. And man, when I discovered a year ago that I had been living in this fear for so long, everything that I was doing fell apart. Nothing I was doing actually worked. I was launching product after product, doing, grinding and using my will, working hard. But not only did it not fix it, it caused my collapse. But it was in that collapse that I was able to emerge with this new understanding. And if you've been watching my videos for the past year, you've seen my attitude and language change towards work, building, entrepreneurship. And it's really more of an inner journey for me these days, a journey that requires balance. And then we'll move into the provider. So this is the guy, most of these guys, I'd say they're in the 40s, they're 50s, and they've gone through the seeker stage. They were young. They've been building and they're now experiencing the fruits of their building. But this is where a lot of men have what they call a midlife crisis. I kind of experienced this at an earlier age than most because I had very early success. By the time I was 36, I had a YouTube channel of over 1 million subscribers. I had multiple gyms. I had millions of dollars and things were going well for me. And that's when the provider problem presented itself to me. It says, okay, now what? You've got all this. And so what's it all about? And once again, the call is inward, but the lie is that, well, the situation that you're in is that success on the outside, but unsatisfied on the inside. And that's why it's an inner journey. What you're dealing with is dissatisfaction, emptiness, and disillusion. Dissatisfaction, I got everything I want, not satisfied. Empty because, well, it's all on the outside. I haven't tended to my inner life. I haven't tended to my prayer life. I haven't tended to my soul. And so I have built my life on troll goals rather than soul goals. And that's why it feels empty. A lot of times these guys, when they evolve, when they take this as an opportunity, invest the money, give it away, philanthropy, and then they go on an inner quest. You'll see this happen quite a bit. Disillusionment, really realizing that it was all been an illusion. Everything I was seeking, everything I was building, at this point, man, it was built on an illusion. And so what ends up happening is you go back to being a seeker again, and it's actually pretty cool, but it's a different type of seeking, and I can totally relate. So the question then becomes, why does this not feel like enough? Why does it not feel like enough? The beautiful thing about being a provider is that you have the resources to fill that gap, to fill that space. It was during this time that I started going back to Mass. I returned to the Catholic faith. I developed my prayer life. Now, this is totally cyclical, so even though I was called back, I didn't have it all figured out. I got a little bit more figured out now, but I didn't have it all figured out around that time. I just knew that the journey was now inward. This is when I discovered the work of Robert Moore and Robert Bly and the archetype of initiation, king, warrior, magician, lover, and all of these inner mechanisms and frameworks. And then, of course, uniting it all with Christ in his church by becoming a Catholic again. And so that you'll often find that that's the case for guys around this age. Young guys, unless they're Gen Z men are flocking back to the church in droves. But for the most part, our culture has taught young men to squander your life. Squander your life, go on these effeminate, pleasure-based journeys, adventures, and the builder gets trapped because now he's got loans, he's got bills, and he's got money to make. But this guy gets an opportunity, and that's why I would say that when you find yourself in this place, you are positioned, you are ready to take on the role of ritual elder or soul guide. Someone who now can go back and serve the younger men. And that's really what I was called to in this new phase of my life. Not competing with the younger men, not trying to lead the younger men in a battle, but to mirror the younger men and to support the younger men in their spiritual journey. So that's what it's all about. What else about this guy? So success equals peace. That was the other lie. The more I succeed, the more peaceful I'll feel, but that is not your life's calling. We're not called to succeed. We're called to thrive. And to thrive, well, there's a difference between wealth and abundance. And we thrive in abundance, meaning that everything that I need will always be provided for me. I am cared for, loved, and blessed by a loving God. And so when I am filled up with that light, I can relax into the truth of what I'm called to. And that really is the case for all three. This requires yielding. You got to yield to the journey and not be reaching. You got to yield into all of the different parts that your life is made up of. And you've got to yield into the next season of your serving in this world. So those are the three men. Where do you find yourself on this journey? Why don't you comment down below if you've been through many stages? Talk about the different stages. I talked a little bit about mine, and recognize that this is cyclical. Now, in the next video, we're going to talk about the specific lies that most men believe into that causes us to fall into the darker side of each of these three categories. The darkness, which is the emotional darkness, which is either associated with suppressing your emotions or allowing your emotions to carry you forward. Both are imbalanced. We need to learn how to discern by using your emotions in order to show you the light rather than blinding you with light or being dark. And then we'll talk about confusion, which is that paralysis by analysis about not knowing what to do next because you're living with lies and seeing in darkness. I hope that helps. Talk soon. Done.